morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased and honored to be moderating this panel discussion today on the Inter-Parliamentary Union in Bahrain, What is at Stake? This panel discussion is organized by Salam for Democracy and Human Rights in collaboration with Amnesty International, the Bahrain Center for Human Rights Watch, and MENA Rights Group. I first want to welcome everyone contributing to the discussion today. We have a great lineup of panelists and experts in no particular order. Yasmin Ahmed, Drury Dyke, Devin Kane, Salwa Boukawit, and Ali Al-Aswad. I will introduce each and every one of you more in details later. As for myself, I'm Ines Osman. I'm the co-founder and executive director of MENA Rights Group. We are a legal advocacy organization based in Geneva that works on the promotion of human rights in the Middle East and North Africa. We will be taking questions at the end of this discussion. So please, for participants interested, you can write your question in the chat or in the comment section. If you're following on YouTube, say to whom your question is addressed, and we will take those towards the end. So without further ado, I will invite Drury Dyke. So Drury has been the international partnerships contact point at Salam for Democracy and Human Rights for the past 5 years, where he's worked to engage international civil society on human rights concerns in Bahrain and across the Gulf. He also co-founded and chairs the UK registered charity Rights Realization Centre, a human rights education and awareness initiative. With Salam for Democracy and Human Rights Director Jawad Fayrouz, he's also a co-founder and steering committee member of Hawiyati, the Middle East and North Africa focused umbrella research and advocacy body relating to statelessness. Between 2017 and 19, he worked with the Saudi Arabia focused Al-Quds for Human Rights, and in 2020 authored the Ceasefire Minority Rights Group report in the name of security, human rights violations under Iran's national security laws. And he also is a former Amnesty International researcher. So Drury, tell us, we're having this discussion today just a few days ahead of the IPU assembly that's going to be held in Manama, Bahrain. Can you tell us a bit more about this event and what exactly is at stake?
Thanks, Ines. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you once again, very early in the morning from Vancouver. The IPU, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, is almost like the UN of parliamentary bodies. It's the locus. It's the organization in which all of the parliamentary bodies of the world get together to discuss issues of shared concern to all parliamentarians, all MPs across the world. And it doesn't matter the nature of the state. It could be Russia, the UAE, Bahrain, Canada, France, and so on. So it's all sorts of states that are represented. When I think about Canada, where I'm speaking from, the representation from this particular country going to the IPU meeting in Manama represents all political parties. So it's a very broad-based undertaking. It takes place between the 11th and 15th of March, so it's pretty just around the corner. I think the lobbying is almost done. The advocacy that we're doing with parliamentarians is almost done. And as I say, it wants to set, it aspires to set an agenda for parliaments globally. And this particular assembly, it's the 146th assembly of the IPU. They have meetings and so on, but the theme this time is promoting peaceful coexistence and and inclusive societies and fighting intolerance. Okay, it's a very broad-based, general sort of theme to discuss, and there will be meetings around it, and maybe it's suitable. But what's at stake for us, and I think the reason why we're gathered here today with, indeed, a former parliamentarian from a previous session in Bahrain, Ali Al-Aswad, is to think about, well, okay, so you're holding this here in Bahrain, but what about the kind of human rights of it all, the real kind of human rights of it all? And I just want to mention that Article 25 of the ICCPR is about the right to take part in public affairs. It's the right to vote, the right to be engaged in deciding how your where you live is meant to function. And what we see historically in Bahrain is that they've not lived up to those strictures. The aim of having people generally be able to take part in public affairs. How? By banning long-standing political organizations under legislation that perhaps we'll discuss later, that has prohibited, banned large political parties. There, for example, Al-Wafaq and Wa'ad, and actual individuals, banning them from standing and preventing them from even taking part in the vote itself. So that's really, I think, for us, what's at stake. It's about bringing home to Bahrain that actually you haven't lived up to the human rights standards that this event aspires to. And we're trying to say to them through a joint letter that our friends at Human Rights Watch organized, we're trying to say to them, it's not good enough. First of all, you've targeted MPs, you've limited the civic space about people being able to take part in public life. And on top of all that, there's a bunch of human rights concerns as well. And that's really, I think, what we're trying to say. Don't let this event be a whitewashing event, a kind of democracy washing of their practices, but rather let's chip away at violations, human rights violations in Bahrain, and use it as an opportunity to advance the cause of what the IPU is all about in the first place. For democracy, for everyone. That's the slogan. So that's really what I think we're going to be discussing in the course of today. Thanks, Ines.
Thank you so much, Juri. And I'm now going to turn to Yasmin Ahmed. So Yasmin is the UK Director of Human Rights Watch. In her current role, she is advocating for the UK's foreign and domestic policies to be consistent with human rights. She has 2 decades of experience as a public international lawyer and human rights advocate. She's a well-known human rights commentator and regularly appears on a variety of media platforms. She was previously the executive director of Rights and Security International and has also worked as a public international lawyer for the UK and Australian governments, as well as the UN International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and the Serious Crimes Unit in Timor-Leste. Yasmin, it's really nice to have you with us today. So I believe that some of your colleagues are actually attending the IPU in Manama. Could you tell us about what Human Rights Watch is hoping to achieve, and what do you consider to be the price, so to say, of the IPU's assembly in Bahrain?
Thank you, Ines, and thank you, Drury, and all of those that I'm sharing the platform on with today, who are incredibly esteemed colleagues. So as you say that Human Rights Watch will be attending, we have a observer status at the IPU, and we'll be sending 2 representatives to Bahrain. What we are hoping to achieve is that we will be able to open up and push space within the context of the IPU and in Bahrain for there to be discussions about the very things that Drury was talking about. The fact now that IPU will be held in Bahrain and will be talking about these values of democracy and open government, and yet at the very same time, Bahrain has incredibly restrictive laws on political participation. There are former parliamentarians who will be sitting in jail whilst parliamentarians sit and discuss these issues. There are political prisoners who have been mistreated. Many organisations have documented that, and the UK and other governments have called on Bahrain to release these individuals, as well as the UN. And we know as well there are systematic laws, including the political isolation laws of 2018, which have been used to systematically repress and stop political participation of the opposition, and in fact be punitive in respect of those individuals. So what we're hoping to do is that by being there, we will be able to, amongst the parliamentarians who are coming from around the world, we'll be able to galvanise those parliamentarians, and we've done that alongside all of our colleagues on the call today, to galvanise those parliamentarians to ensure that these discussions are infused with what is happening on the ground while it's happening. We're also wanting to make sure that these issues are raised with the government of Bahrain. To date, we have been very disappointed with the way that the UK government has raised these issues in respect of Bahrain. We have seen in the latest Human Rights and Democracy report that the UK government significantly watered down its assessment of Bahrain. And we can only imagine that that's likely to be influenced by the fact that there's a free trade agreement that's going to be signed, and there's a huge amount of economic incentive for the UK government to have a good relationship with Bahrain. So for us, and as Drury said, similarly for the UK and other countries, it will be a coalition of parliamentarians from across the political spectrum that will be going. We have briefed many of them, and we will also be hoping to hold events while we were there to highlight, or at least be able to highlight, some of these issues while we're there. So I think for us, I mean, what we've seen in past situations, whether it's Rwanda hosting the Commonwealth heads of government, or whether it was Qatar hosting the World Cup, what we have seen is that countries who are routine human rights violators, and who are in fact violating the very values of the organisations that are holding their events, they utilise these, and unfortunately some of the states and the individuals that participate in them allow them to do so. They allow them to whitewash their abuses. So for us, what is very, very key is that parliamentarians that go there, the discussions that are had, make sure that the voices of the political prisoners in Bahrain, of those that have been subject to political isolation, and who've been subject to the death penalty and execution, unfair trials, so on and so forth, that these issues are raised, and that we continue to push Bahrain to comply with its human rights obligations.
Thank you so much, Yasmin, and we look forward also to hopefully have the feedback of your colleagues once they've returned from the assembly. I'm going to turn now to Salwa Boukawit. So Salwa is an advocate with the Bahrain Center for Human Rights. In November 2022, actually, her organization obtained accreditation with the UN Economic and Social Council, also known as the ECOSOC status, which also grants you access to a number of UN fora. So congratulations on that. This will hopefully also provide somewhat greater protection to the BCHR and Salwa's work. She has previously worked on cybersecurity and the Pegasus question, as well as the long-standing impact of the 2011 unrest in Bahrain and promoting the Bahraini authorities' adherence to international human rights standards. Salwa, thank you for being with us today. So your organization, the Bahrain Center for Human Rights, is actually based in the country. What does BCHR hope to achieve during the assembly? What is it that you're looking for?
Thank you, Ines. Well, first of all, we're not actually based in Bahrain. We're actually based in Copenhagen. The organization is actually banned in Bahrain, so being in Denmark gives us more maneuver to work. So I would like to start by emphasizing the importance of the IPU, and that it gathers parliamentarians from around the world to discuss global issues, and thus it creates an opportunity for lawmakers to discuss their ideas and share their experiences and best practices concerning matters such as democracy, peace, and sustainable development. So it's an opportunity to efficiently come forward with solutions to human rights related issues, such as gender equality, protection of minority rights, and the right to freedom of expression. More generally, the IPU platform is an opportunity to strengthen democracy by introducing new perspectives and approaches to governance, to create more just societies where citizens' dignity is restored. So if we look at it in this positive way, it has to be emphasized that for such a platform to be efficient and have positive impacts, it should be used in a way where transparency and accountability is prevalent. In the case of Bahrain, where BCHR the Bahrain Center for Human Rights, would like to see as positive outcomes of the IPU is that parliamentarians actually be held accountable in the representation of Bahraini citizens' voices. It's really crucial that the platform be used in a way that improves the human rights situation in Bahrain in dealing with the major issues, such as the release of prisoners, the imprisonments and treatments of prisoners, the improvements of the treatment of prisoners and also former prisoners and their families faced with inequalities in, for example, applying for jobs and being admitted to universities. So I would like to emphasize that in order to deal with the human rights issues I just mentioned, it's crucial to deal with the underlying issue of the suppression of freedom of speech. I believe that the freedom of speech is the underlying issue of the other human rights issues that we have in Bahrain. So steps have to be taken forward to amend the restrictive laws that are being used in Bahrain to limit the freedom of speech of human rights defenders and activists, as well as journalists. These same laws are being used to detain and prosecute anyone who has critical views, and it has created an environment of suppression which has reduced the civic space in Bahrain, if not completely shut down the civic space. This is what I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salwa. Now I'm going to be turning to Devin. So Devin Kenny is the researcher on Bahrain, Kuwait, and the UAE at Amnesty International. Along with his work at the Gulf-focused human rights organizations, Americans for Democracy and Human Rights in Bahrain, he has over a decade of experience in working on human rights issues in the Middle East. And his current work focuses on the stateless community in Kuwait. Devin is also a law graduate from the University of Oregon. Thank you so much, Devin, for being with us today. So could you tell us a bit what is the broader human rights context in Bahrain in which this event is taking place? So I understand that the Bahraini government is claiming to engage with UN human rights bodies. For example, does holding the IPU assembly in Bahrain means that while human rights issues may be contested, there is nevertheless some level of government engagement despite this? Like, what is your assessment of the situation?
Thank you, Ines. And let me do my standard check first. You're hearing me? Yes. Okay, great. Well, the broader human rights context is that there are very severe restrictions on freedom of expression, association, and assembly, that there are still 10 prominent figures from Bahraini society held in prison for exercising those rights during the 2011 demonstrations, which means in Amnesty International lingo that there are 10 prisoners of conscience still paying the price for peaceful protest over a decade later. and that there are persistent problems of abuse by guards and of medical neglect in the prison system and of arbitrary arrests for real or suspected dissent in the country at large. Since this event is about the Inter-Parliamentary Union's meeting in Bahrain, I am going to zoom in on the right to association as it relates to parliamentary life in Bahrain. And the facts in this sphere are really stark. The most basic fact is that what is both the largest opposition party and the largest party, full stop, in Bahrain has now been totally banned from participating in parliamentary life, and its leader has been placed in prison for life. And here I'm referring to the party Al-Wifaq and its leader, the Shia cleric Ali Salman. Al-Wifaq existed legally in Bahrain, having registered with the government as an association in 2001. And since 2005, they were legally authorized to participate in elections there, crucially parliamentary elections. They ran in the parliamentary elections of 2006 and 2010. And in 2010, they won 18 seats. That is out of a 40-seat elected House of Parliament. That makes them the largest party ever in Parliament under the current constitutional system, which was established in 2002. Note that assessment is without respect to the previous parliament that existed briefly under the old constitution in the early to mid 1970s. And then in between, there was a quarter century with no elections and no parliament at all. But under the 2002 system, Al-Wifaq was the most successful party in elections. So the point here is that under the rules of the political game as set by the government itself, unilaterally in this millennium, there has been no more politically successful parliamentary party in the country than Al-Wifaq. So let us turn then to what has happened since 2011. As a result of the repressive government reaction to the mass protests that year, Al-Wifaq's MPs resigned in protest and subsequently declined to take part in the 2014 elections. In December 2014, the government put Al-Wifaq's head, Ali Salman, in prison for giving political speeches. In 2016, they outlawed Al-Wifaq, the party, altogether, citing mostly grounds that were meaninglessly vague, like opposition to the Constitution. The most serious accusation was that the party had, quote, praised violence, but the indictment was devoid of any credible evidence that Al-Wifaq had said something constituting incitement to violence, which is the relevant question under international law. In 2018, Bahrain raised the sentence on Ali Salman to a sentence of life in prison by characterizing his participation in government opposition talks with Qatar as mediator during the 2011 crisis, as if this were spying for Qatar. In addition to Al-Wifaq's saga, in 2012, the government banned another previously legal Shia opposition party, Amal, and in 2017, they outlawed the non-sectarian leftist party, WAD. On top of that, in 2016, the Al-Ikha party, which was formed among Bahrain's Persian descent Shia community, announced its own dissolution, citing, quote, pressures exercised by the Ministry of Justice and, quote, the shrinking margin granted to freedom of expression. So this is three parliamentary parties playing within the rules of the game as set by the government since 2002, and including the most significant party in the country by voting weight that the government then outlawed, in addition to a fourth party that ended its own existence, stating that it was compelled to do so because of the repressive environment. And then most recently, in the lead up to the 2018 parliamentary elections, Bahrain amended its law on the exercise of political rights to ban members of dissolved political associations from running as candidates at all. So in other words, in addition to having banned those parties themselves, now there's no way that their members or former members can run for office as independents. So all this being taken into account, Bahrain is a country where if it's not unique, then it is at least in the higher tiers of countries where the right to association and public participation of parliamentarians in particular has been violated in a very concerted way. I'm not any kind of expert on the Inter-Parliamentary Union, but I have to assume, given the title, that they're concerned with the rights of MPs and with the democratic process. So holding an IPU session in Bahrain seems obviously problematic and highly challenging for an organization with that kind of mandate. So what I'll say in conclusion on these opening remarks is that I hope the IPU has mechanisms to address violations of parliamentary rights, and that these will be used in Bahrain, and that they will result in public and quite frank criticism of Bahrain's record, because it is clear that the right to political association and participation through parliamentary life has been quite systematically violated over the last decade in Bahrain. And there was an additional element of the question about UN engagement. We can circle back to that maybe in Q&A, but yeah, I can speak on that too if you like, as and when.
Thank you, Devin. We can go back to that towards the end. And I do believe that the IPU has a human rights committee that is dealing with cases of parliamentarians that would be under attack or reprisals. I'm curious actually to know, and maybe we can go back to that later, if anyone has used this mechanism and what their view on that is. We're actually honored to have with us Ali Al-Aswad, who is a former Bahraini member of parliament. But before I turn to you, Ali, I'm going to actually give the floor back to Drury. Drury, I believe Salam for Democracy and Human Rights has issued a briefing on former members of parliament who've been targeted in Bahrain. Could you tell us like the key findings of that report?
Thanks, Ines. Yeah, and I think actually Devin has already addressed the kind of broad scenario of what took place and the context of which what took place. Banning of the largest single party, three other smaller but nevertheless still significant parties, and the imprisonment of the leader of one of them, Ali Salman. We have one of them, as you say, Ali Al-Aswad is with us, so he can tell us more about the individuals. But when we looked at the 15 former parliamentarians that the government targeted, two of whom were parliamentarians at the time of what happened to them, their targeting, and as a result of that, precisely as you've just said, the Committee on the Human Rights of Parliamentarians of the IPU did raise their case, has raised their cases, and continues to raise their case. And maybe one of them, Jawad Faydouz, who is the director of Salam for Democracy and Human Rights, perhaps he'll join us at some point and tell us a little bit about that. Ali can add. But I just want to come to the key findings about this, just looking at the 15 former MPs who were targeted. And it's a bit of a catalogue, so I'm sorry for that. But it's a pretty nasty catalogue. 11, this is a 15, right? 11 arbitrarily detained, 11 charged with an offence not internationally recognizable as criminal, 10 sentenced for an offence under Bahraini law that is not consistent with internationally recognizable criminal law. 2 were tortured, 4 deprived of their citizenship, 6 now reside outside the country, 2 currently imprisoned, and as I say, 2 of them, Jawad Faydouz and Matar Matar, have the cases raised by the Committee on the Human Rights of Parliamentarians with the government of Bahrain. So perhaps, I don't know, maybe Ali might come back to that, but I just feel for people like Ali who were part of this, very representative body, and then who then kind of through no fault of their own end up being banned. And I guess that's kind of tragic, really. Thanks. And to hear what Ali has to say.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. We'll now turn to Ali Al-Aswad, who is, as I was saying, a former Bahraini parliamentarian affiliated with Al-Wifaq since its inception in 2001. And he was elected in September 2010 with 87% of the vote to represent the second district of the Northern Governorate. He resigned in February 2011, along with 17 other colleagues in protest at the treatment of pro-democracy protesters in Bahrain. He's currently residing in exile in London, where he's working as a commentator and analyst and continues his work in advocating for democratic reforms in Bahrain. Authorities have actually targeted Ali for his peaceful work. And he's been living in London since June 2011 after leaving Bahrain during the crackdown on protest. Ali also has a degree in engineering and worked at the Ministry of Works before entering politics. Thank you so much, Ali, for being with us today and sharing your testimony as someone who's been really directly impacted by all the issues that we've been raising before. So could you tell us, as a former member of parliament with a now banned organization, what's your assessment of this IPU assembly being held in Manama, and what do you hope to see, or what do you think should be done?
Well, thank you very much, Ines and Salam, for hosting me here today with other colleagues. It's just something being mentioned by Jory and Devin, which is I was about to talk about the 15 MPs targeted and what is Al-Wifaq. But on behalf of Al-Wifaq, the largest opposition party in Bahrain, I would like to take this opportunity to shed the light on some of the violations that have been imposed on former MPs like myself. And then maybe I can go to what we need from this Inter-Parliamentarian or the IPU hosting the event or meetings in Bahrain. First, allow me to present a brief introduction about Al-Wifaq for whom they don't know more. Maybe the participant they know, but some audience, they need to know. Al-Wifaq is the largest opposition group and the biggest parliamentary bloc ever. In 2018, the Court of Cassation decided to uphold the closure of Al-Wifaq National Islamic Societies based on accusations related to a peaceful approach in 2011 following the pro-democracy uprising in Bahrain and other Arab countries. Not only has the government banned political parties, it's also prevented individuals from both standing for parliaments and even voting. Following arbitrary governmental decisions on unfair trials for the election held in November 2022, the governments of Bahrain maintain its ban of individuals affiliated with the dissolved political parties. Al-Wifaq, the largest political opposition, and Wa'ad, Amal, Wifaq, the secular party opposition, and second largest single grouping, Amal as well, like what Evan mentioned, both, all of them in terms of standing and voting. Obviously, Amal in 2011. Al-Ikhwa dissolved themselves because they haven't seen, the atmosphere in Bahrain is accepting kind of opposition or talking freely about the local situation. In continuing a protest, 18 members of Bahraini parliaments belonging to the opposition and Wifaq bloc resigned on February 27th in a protest over the killing of 7 demonstrators by securing forces since demonstrations began on February the 14th. Ever since, Al-Wifaq members have been continuously targeted and Al-Wifaq has been continuously targeted for authorities. They targeted at least 3 sitting parliamentarians and at least 12 others who had served as MPs. The government has delegitimized, arrested, tortured, imprisoned, and stripped former parliamentarians of their citizenships like Sheikh Hassan Sultan, Jawad Fayrouz, and Dr. Jalal Fayrouz as well. allow me to represent a brief yet detailed representations of violations former of MPs. Drury did mention these, but you need to highlight on those 11 MPs arbitrarily detained for reasons that may amount to arbitrary detains based on the basis of arrest. 11 MPs were charged with the offense. 10 MPs were sentenced from offense. 2 were tortured. 4 were deprived of citizenship. 6 now residing outside the country. 2 currently in prison, like Sheikh Ali Salman and Sheikh Hassan Isa. 2 cases of my colleagues Jawad Fayrouz and Matar are being investigated by the IPU. So the IPU, they are aware of the political situation and the MPs targeted by Bahraini authorities in Bahrain, knowing that the IPU connects member parliaments to each other and serves as a global focal point for parliamentary dialogue and action, helps parliaments and MPs to exercise their mandate effectively and freely, as well as governmental actions, and encourage parliaments to be representatives of all societies. It is needless to say that Bahrain clearly does not meet these standards. I think Inter-Parliamentary group, they have to highlight on these issues while they are meeting Bahraini officials probably, and also some other MPs locally there. In fact, it has utilized a legal regime aiming to strangle what remains of Bahrain democracy. Therefore, in the name of Al-Wifaq, I would like to highlight here, as a former parliamentarian sentenced to life jail based on fabricated accusations, like they made up a story because of what happened between Bahrain and Qatar, and between the Gulf countries and Qatar, Egypt among them, during the conflicts with Qatar in 2017, and has a former parliamentarian sentenced to life jail based on fabricated accusations in a trial deemed unlawful and politicized by United Nations group and international organizations like yours. I call on participants to call for the release of former MPs, Sheikh Ali Salman and Sheikh Hassan Isa, and all other opposition figures, and urge the governments of Bahrain to allow the formation and unhindered operations of political opposition groups, repeal the 2018 amendments to the law of exercise of political rights, and reinstate the citizenship of all who have been stripped of, especially former MPs. IPU, they on their speech, privately or officially, probably they might say we are protecting the MPs, current MPs. I would like to say you are going to a country where you see or you practice MPs in jail, and peaceful MPs, they are in jail. And at least the minimum what they can do is to call for releasing all these political prisoners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali. And if I may actually ask you a follow-up question again, as someone who's been directly impacted by this, I'm curious to know, what would you say is the kind of opportunity that such an event represents, in the sense that, as we said, you know, it will also be used by the Bahraini government as a way to whitewash human rights abuses, yet at the same time represents an opportunity for certain MPs, you know, to address human rights abuses, for the team of Human Rights Watch, for example, to try and raise awareness on these issues. But I'm just wondering, what's, let's say, the opportunity cost between those? Aren't you worried that this will really be a great opportunity for Bahraini authorities? Like, is it more a whitewashing tool or an opportunity, you know, for civil society to kind of speak up? Like, are you really hopeful that this will bring about change in Bahrain, and that, you know, this as an advocacy opportunity will be used in a way that will be effective, and will get you some results and release of MPs, etc. What's your assessment of that?
I would assume of those MPs and inter-parliamentary groups that address these issues and they raise it, and they arrange probably kind of a press conference talking about the human rights, the basic human rights, which is not in Bahrain now, and the democracy, where the officials and the Bahraini government keep saying that we have democracy in our country, while we have seen MPs practicing, imprisonment, and they are serving life sentences in jail. My experience with the Bahraini authority, yes, they are using this now. They start using this in the media for a whitewash. They are publishing every day now. We are hosting the Inter-Parliamentary group internationally. 2,000 of member of parliaments all around the world, they are attending Bahrain. What does that mean? And also Bahrain authorities, the same time, they say we are hosting a meeting for United Nations. The leaders of United Nations, they are in Bahrain. At the same time, they are hosting a Formula One at the same time. So all these been done, for a whitewash, and it's been paid for. It is not being done like this. Bahrain is the smallest country in the world. It's not going to have all of these, events in Bahrain coincidentally. There must be something behind, where I think where this organization, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, other organizations, they should raise this to the Western governments. I remember I attended one meeting with Sheikh Ali Salman in London, and he was talking to the officials, and he said, don't give this as a free of charge to Bahrain. If you want to see a reform in Bahrain, don't do air show in Bahrain and Formula One in Bahrain and other things in Bahrain without Bahraini officials doing anything. If he said, we are talking to them privately, and we are talking today publicly about this, what is happening, Bahrain needs a pressure from international community. Hosting these events in Bahrain IPU, shaking hands with the IPU Secretary General, probably having some photos, going for a dinner, it will not help the prisoners inside the jail.
Thank you so much, Ali. Does anyone want to add to this? Jury, please go ahead.
Just a really quick observation. Thanks, Ali. I mean, that's, I think it's all right. I really hope that our friends in Human Rights Watch will be able to kind of push the envelope here. And okay, they're not going to be able to hold the whole government to account in one fell swoop, but by just being in Bahrain and putting those interests, those concerns front and center, maybe there's a chance to chip away at this thing, to say, actually, this is not all great. Because at the moment, and I think as Ali was saying, with the F1 and this event, and indeed many others, there's a kind of public relation. They're on a public relations role. They've been on a very studied public relations role for a number of years now, and it's incumbent upon us to chip away at that veneer of normality, to show, just as Ali said, there are people imprisoned for expressing their views, and Devin said it as well. There's people who are being tortured, deprived of their citizenship, kind of en masse, and it's just really not acceptable. And then again, as Devin said earlier, it's quite a challenge for the IPU to then pitch up in Manama and say, and kind of imply that this is all kind of normal. So I really hope that our Human Rights Watch friends can, I don't know, somehow get themselves in the mix without obviously getting into trouble, and they've got to remain safe. But their presence is really important. It's pushing at the boundaries, and good luck to them.
Thank you, Jury. I don't know if anyone from the panelists would like to add any thoughts or any other questions directed at the other panelists. And I also want to remind the audience that you have the opportunity to ask questions if you'd like. No, then perhaps I can actually ask the panelists one more questions, kind of looking ahead. Sorry, I see Jawad Fairuz raising his hand. Please go ahead.
Yes, thanks a lot, and highly appreciated your all valuable contribution. As usual, we look at any international events which is going on in Bahrain as an opportunity to find a root solution to current Bahraini crisis, mainly human rights violations. I think it is in moral and humanitarian duty of all those who are attending, MPs, NGOs, and whoever can play a positive role to somehow deliver the clear message to the authorities. We know it is totally a technical agenda of the IPU Assembly, but we believe such events could be an excellent opportunity to find out any types of the international pressure to adopt reforms in Bahrain. I believe that the total security and stability of the region cannot be maintained unless the GCC countries and all the Gulf states and whoever part of that region to adopt a democratic process within their political system. In the same time, to be sure that the human rights values to be totally protected and to be part of any legislations. And here the main role of the all parliamentarian in the Gulf to be. And I think that they should maintain the oath that they had when they had the seat to protect the interests of the people and interests of the country more than the interests of the regime. And yet we can see these high violations against not only the normal citizens, which is totally rejected, but even with the elected members of the parliament, like me and Ali and other MPs. And we are so serious about that, certain actions to be taken. For sure, all these parliamentarians, they will have some private meetings with the Bahraini authorities, the king, prime minister, Shura council chair, elected council chair, and the rest. I think they should be so clear to deliver this clear message that stop to any types of the human rights violations, free of all prisoner of conscience, banning any continuation on the death penalties, and trying to establish any type of the justice for all the victims. And at the end, we think that such events, maybe the state or the government try to have some whitewash, but at the end, I think there's good opportunity for all of us to try to take it as an advantage to forward through any types of the reforms, human rights and political reforms in Bahrain. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Sorry, I don't know. I want to say something when Jory talked. And Mr. Jawad, he just mentioned right now. When we said whitewash and who's behind this? Do we have to hide who's behind having Bahrain hosting this big events with zero cost on Bahrain? Look, Bahrain, they are just doing it like publicly now, and it seems like everything is fixed, reinstated, and there is no issue. And it means they are sure who's behind them is going to cover all of these violations, is going to cover all these breakdown in the political systems, all corruptions, all economical issues, and everything else. Having only business in Bahrain because we have 2,000 rooms booked in a hotels during the Formula One. There was a statement yesterday says every parliamentarian groups, they will finance themselves. So that means Bahrain is not financing this. We all know there is no money because all this money is being taken part of the corruption system where we have in Bahrain. So who's behind this, and what can we do to, as an influence, bodies, to highlight on what is happening in Bahrain to the international community? Thank you.
Thank you, Drury, please.
Thanks, Ines. And just picking up from what Ali had to say, and I think it's a mark of our own frustration in engaging, parliamentarians who are setting out on this thing. there has been very little take up of any substance. And I think, for example, Yasmin works in the UK parliamentary context quite a lot, and if I'm not mistaken, sure, there are a small number of parliamentarians, and in the British context, members of the House of Lords who are engaged, and they engage really well. But it's just as a kind of generally, it's kind of not enough. And when I looked at as I say, I'm sitting here in Canada. I looked at the list of those who are leaving, who are setting out for Bahrain in a few days' time from the Canadian Parliament, and sure, it's broad based, but then okay, Canada's pretty far away, but there's just not a real kind of engagement. Either we have failed, or we haven't adequately got our kind of message across to parliamentarians, or they're just not getting it, or they've kind of been bought. I don't know, but I'm really frustrated with the kind of international parliamentary scene. As Ali said, they're kind of paying for themselves. This is an event that's held at the invitation of the government of Bahrain. So the government of Bahrain has played a blinder. They've invited an international organization to go. They are going. They're holding this event there. Is it cost-free? Well, not entirely. There may be a small degree of cost, but I'd really like to see a bit more kind of real engagement from MPs who are going to say, actually, we will hold a side event. That's what I think that's the key thing here about parliamentarians. When we've heard about previous IPU assemblies in other countries and other areas of the world, IPU officials themselves told us that the holding of a side event by parliamentarians about a topic that's challenging for that region is the way to get that issue, kind of on the agenda, or chipped away at for that region in particular. They talked about LGBTQI rights in Uganda and Tanzania when they held an IPU event in Rwanda. So they kind of chipped away at issues that were very difficult for the region, and that could be the same here. That if parliamentarians are willing to hold a side event that addresses these issues and addresses the issues that Devon set out, that would be something. That would be something, and it would be just that little bit. We'll see. We'll see, and it also depends, like I said earlier, on what the Human Rights Watch team managed to do, and hopefully not get themselves kicked out.
Thank you. And does anyone else want to add anything to what Drury was just explaining?
Just to come in, obviously we'll at Human Rights Watch will be pushing as hard as we can, and we've been working alongside parliamentarians to see what we can do in terms of engagement at the IPU. But I think what you say, Drury, is really important, that there seems to be an apathy. And I think the apathy is partly, and it's partly because I think Bahrain, and obviously those on the panel will know better than I, but Bahrain has been able to create an image and a narrative very cleverly and carefully, particularly in relation to other states in the Gulf, as a state that's reforming, even though, it may acknowledge, and I guess the narrative it presents is that it acknowledges it's not fully the way there yet, but it's on the road to reform. And that is certainly what we see when we hear and engage with either the government or some MPs in the UK who are, sort of present that picture to us. And I think it's obviously a picture that's very helpful for Bahrain. And I think that's our role to continuously dismantle that narrative and continue to evidence and speak about like what we have today, about the fact that actually this narrative is one that is just being born for for expediency and does not bear reality, and is in the interests often of states as well, to be peddling that, I think, as well, because they have, economic and other interests involved. So I think, there are some opportunities. I think whilst the free trade agreement in the context of the UK is a potential, obviously a very significant potential problem, if it doesn't raise human rights and address human rights, it also presents an opportunity. So we're trying to look for opportunities of how we can engage and push. And obviously there's the Gulf Strategy Fund, the much discussed and very little known about Gulf Strategy Fund, where the UK government provides money to Gulf countries, including Bahrain. What we do know is that money has gone to some of the bodies which HRW and others have researched that have been implicated in human rights abuses. And I think that's another point that's very interesting for parliamentarians, is when you start thinking about, the fact that UK money, government money, is actually being provided to Bahrain, and then for what, how much transparency, and what kind of conditions and others have been provided, which don't appear to be very transparent at all. But just some thoughts from my end. But I do think that there's been a very, very careful crafting of a narrative that we have to very concertedly try and dismantle.
Absolutely agree, Yasmin. Thank you. I see Jassim raising a hand. Could you please introduce yourself and ask your questions or comments? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is Jassim. I'm in Bahrain now. I've been following this IPU business now. Anything that I can gather really on. I think really my advice really to the people, to the MPs like Ali Al Aswad and Jawad Fayrouz, is really to focus on the theme of the conference, which is really tolerance. That they should push, on a few items like Bahrain should be accepting different ways of doing matters, political things, so long as they are peaceful. So the theme is tolerance. And that there should be room for all, and not just for certain ways of thinking. Really, this is really one. The other thing is good to pick up on a few issues. The issue of Sheikh Ali Salman, who's the leader of Al Wafaq, an MP behind bars, and Sheikh Hassan Isa is also so MPs behind bars. MPs should not be behind bars, really. Everybody knows that Sheikh Ali Salman has always been a peaceful man for really pushing for change through peaceful and only peaceful means, really. So I think really the idea of trying to challenge is not the right thing to do, it's whitewash or not. I think this is an opportunity to push for this tolerance matter, no MPs behind bars, rather than really challenging, because some of the MPs coming to Bahrain, they may not know Bahrain very well. We are expecting people from 178 countries, and not all of them know the country very well. Some do, but for sure, really, really, they just need to be really told of the principles that MPs are really people who do peaceful and only peaceful things. Just interestingly, I think the authorities are expecting some sort of confrontations between MPs from different countries like Russia and Ukraine, Iran and Israel, India and Pakistan, and elsewhere really from Africa and Latin America. So there are lots of issues behind the MPs. So better to focus on a few: tolerance and the notion that no MP should be behind bars, especially Sheikh Ali Salman and Sheikh Hassan Isa. Thank you.
Thank you, Jassim. And Drury, I see you would like to share some more thoughts.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think what Jassim has raised is they're two really great points. And thank you, Jassim, for raising it. You're right. We are focusing on tolerance as an issue. And you're bang on. But I guess I would question what sort of tolerance is represented by an authority which bans on no verifiable basis the major political party of a state? Whose tolerance is really at play when its leaders are arbitrarily detained and indeed tortured? And as you say, correctly, and I think rightly, I totally agree with you, Jassim, MPs should not be behind bars. But as far as I can tell, it's not MPs who have put other MPs behind bars. It's the government of Bahrain which has put MPs behind bars. So if we want to see tolerance represented at the IPU event between the 11th and 15th of March in Bahrain, then the most tolerant thing that the government of Bahrain could do, and if you could advise them to do so, would be to release immediately and unconditionally Ali Salman and other MPs, and to resolve the two outstanding cases that the IPU have raised with the government of Bahrain for years about Jawad Fayrouz and Matar Matar. Tolerance, you're completely right. I absolutely agree with you. And you, above all, know and understand that tolerance. When, I ask, will that tolerance be shown by the government of Bahrain itself? It would be great to see. We would all welcome it. And hopefully, as you say yourself, that this tolerance will be exemplified during this IPU meeting, and at the end of which Ali Salman will walk free. That would be great. That would have the government of Bahrain showing tolerance, and they would have fulfilled at least some element of the objective of this IPU meeting. So, Jassim, I echo your thoughts completely in your call for the immediate and unconditional release of Ali Salman, the unbanning of those political parties by showing tolerance, and a better future for all Bahrainis. So thanks, Jassim, for bringing those up.
Thank you, Drury. And I think, personally, I don't know much about the past IPU assemblies or where they've been held, but I do believe that it also brings the question of, does this set somewhat of a precedent if the IPU, with all the principles and values that this assembly is supposed to represent, is being held in a country where, as we said, MPs are imprisoned, where there is virtually no civic space or, freedom of association, then what does it mean, and where is it going to be held next? Perhaps in a country where there is no parliament, in some other places in the Gulf. I believe that it also raises some other broader questions about holding such events in these places. Ali, I see your hand raised.
Yes. We've mentioned in our interactions, all of us, I believe, about how we have these demands of releasing political prisoners and improving the human rights situation in a country like Bahrain. Let me just share with you something before I leave that. When we talk about tolerance, for example, we're talking about a country where the government doesn't believe on dialogue with the nations or with the opposition, in a country where the governments and authority, they don't believe on reconciliation, in a country where the government, they don't believe of engagement or political partnerships, in a governments, they don't believe on freedom of speech, no newspapers, independent newspapers in Bahrain. In a governments, they practice non-independence power between, say, the governments and the parliaments. They give them order and they play this role under the table. In a governments where having a very, very critical things, which is independence of power, of judiciary, they are not independent. The judge is not independent. They are receiving the instructions from royal courts or whoever. So when we raise things like releasing Sheikh Ali Salman, it was raised already, and Sheikh Hassan Isa raised already by high political diplomats like John Kerry at that time during Obama's administrations. Is even before Trump. while the Bahraini authorities, they were thinking of changing the situation of releasing him or not. They've gone through way far than releasing him by detaining him for life sentences with 2 other MPs, which is myself amongst them. So we would love to see these engagements between the governments and the opposition, or between the governments and whoever they think. They think that, oh, we have a parliament now. We all know what is the parliament in Bahrain now. We all know. We don't have to go back to square one now and say, okay, this parliament has no real representation. This parliament has been designed to have minority, very little voices of oppositions, and whenever they speak, they got a call from, the authorities and whatsoever. So we're aiming to improve the situation, and we think this is an opportunity. The whitewash, yes, the whitewash Bahrain is using, I mentioned at the beginning, a couple of things as a part of whitewash. You see the first picture today in the newspapers, authorities, meeting with the United Nations leaders. So where are these United Nations leaders from Bahrain detaining political parties and opposition? And where are these leaders from? What they are doing there in Bahrain? Enjoying the dinner, enjoying the Ritz-Carlton, enjoying the hotels in Sakhir, what they are doing there. This is maybe my concern and a big question here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. I don't see any additional questions. I don't know if some of the panelists would like to share some final thoughts, perhaps looking at Devin and Salwa on my screen who haven't spoken again, if you'd like to share some final thoughts with us.
If not, I have a question to Devin, maybe.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I don't know what Amnesty's is engagement with the British government in London now. Are they getting this space? Are they talking to the British governments about these problems like whitewash things and the influence from British governments on Bahrain? Yes or no? And if there is any more details he can share with us. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so earlier this year, we had a meeting with the British ambassador to Bahrain, Roddy Drummond, and then just today I was trying to set up a follow-up meeting with the Human Rights Desk officer in Bahrain within the Foreign Office of the UK. In terms of what we discuss with them, I mean, Amnesty tends to keep its focus for the most part on the actual violations of the country under examination. So whitewashing is sort of a step removed from that. Whitewashing is a strategy to distract attention from human rights violations or cover them up. So what we tend to raise with the British government over and over again is the banning of al-Wifaq, the lifetime imprisonment of Ali Salman, other prisoners of conscience, and so on and so forth. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question in a satisfactory way. I mean, we continue to speak with them, and we continue to go right to the heart of the matter as we see it, which is repression of political rights.
Thank you, Devin. Salwa, would you like to share some final thoughts with us?
Yeah, I guess my final thoughts on this is that we at BCHR are well aware of the whitewashing use of these kind of events. And we're concerned about it too, but we would like to stay positive about how this platform can be used. And if not at the platform itself, then the noise that will be made around it and how that can be used to bring up the important violations that are ongoing and to take just a few steps forward into improving the situation a little bit, as it's very stagnant and has been very stagnant in the last years.
And again, one more question to Salwa, Inas, if you allow me.
Yes,
of course.
We've heard now from, I'm in London, but we've heard about Dr. Singais and Abdelhadi Al-Khawaja and Hassan Mashema health. Their health is not really good. do you have some kind of communication with Bahraini authorities, like the ombudsman or whoever is responsible or in charge, or the Red Cross, probably maybe internationally? Are they visiting Bahrain, the Red Cross? Because we never heard from them, like whether they're doing some stuff in Bahrain, yes or no? Or
as I'm aware of, we haven't had like any direct communication with the government. But we would like to do that. We are working on being more in dialogue with the government as a new strategy of trying to improve the situation in Bahrain. But as for now, we haven't had that, as I'm aware of.
So what about the health condition now? Is the health condition will wait until these things, the discussions, the communication will happen?
No, we are advocating for it and hoping for the best.
Maybe I'm just suggesting maybe to the human rights bodies here or organizations to have something bigger than this. Like if the health is really critical, where Bahrain, we all know. I was sharing this or asking questions to whoever is calling me also from inside prison about. And they said we're receiving very little of medications. We don't get what we ask for. So this is probably something, will ring the bell to the international community about the situation there, or?
I mean, we're doing as much advocacy on it as possible. And I mean, we welcome any new ideas and strategies on how to be able to move forward on these issues. So we're really open for discussion and sharing ideas.
Drury.
Thanks, Ali. Just really, really quickly, our time is running out now anyway. But Ali, I don't know if you know this or not, but we, Salam for Democracy and Human Rights, has met a couple of times with the Red Cross. The Red Cross does have the International Committee of the Red Cross. They're based in Kuwait. They're not in Bahrain. They make trips from Kuwait to Bahrain. And yes, that's something that they can look into. But we'll never hear about what they do. They, as part of their mandate, they receive the information and representation that we make. And indeed, we, as you say, on these recent developments about Abdul Hadi and Dr. Singais and stuff, we have not raised those recently. But they are, they can be approached by political parties, by NGOs and so on, by family members above all. And I know there are some family members who have approached the ICRC office in Kuwait, and they have been able to visit. It's not easy. But I guess that's one way. But we'll never hear about what the ICRC is able to do or not able to do in country. They just won't tell us. But I guess just to add, that's one option. Before we wrap up, just thanks everyone, at least from my perspective, for taking part. Devin, Ali, Yasmin, Ines, thanks for taking your time out as well, for sharing. Thanks very much. And Salwa, thanks a lot, guys. But in case no one comes back on anything else.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Drury, and thank you everybody for all your insightful comments. I think also I want to say maybe some last few words, and we can probably dedicate this webinar and this discussion to all the prisoners of conscience in Bahrain who've paid a very heavy price for, merely speaking up. And as Ali was mentioning, many of those are still in prison today. That will wrap this up. I don't know if Ali, you want to have the last words of this, and then we close.
I was just clapping hands to you about what you mentioned.
Great.
I would like to see this some changes here. I mean, I wish human rights, and I wish whoever is attending meeting MPs within the IPU to address all of these things, no matter whom they are, like whether they know Bahrain or they don't know Bahrain, whether they know where they are going or not. Probably this is an opportunity where we will see kind of activities also from us as Al-Wifaq. We are taking this as a serious matter. We are taking this as an opportunity. We are taking this as probably a space where we can talk more MPs, and so many MPs also been approached by us, and talking to them privately, and talking to some other parliamentarian bodies within Europe and in Arab countries as well. Some of Arab countries, imagine Inas and the audience here, some of Arab countries, some of member of parliaments, they think because we have elections in Bahrain, things reinstated, fixed now. They said, oh, you are outside and maybe we don't know what's going on there in Bahrain, but Wifaq is not there. So its opposition is not there. Wa'ad is not there. So no one had a space, And we don't think also leaving this authority, in a peace and quiet, like we don't host any events or we don't do something like this now, what we are doing today. It is very important, highly important to speak on behalf of our colleagues and friends behind bars. They don't have this opportunity. And I believe they are appreciating a lot, by large, what you are doing. And they are appreciating any events, anything bringing their voice up, to the international community. Probably you see them. We publish a lot of, and Salam and other organizations, Bahrain Center for Human Rights, a lot of speeches, a lot of short, voices from them talking about their situation behind bars, where this is very important. What we are aiming in Al-Wifaq to have the reconciliation through the dialogue, where we see everyone else sitting on the table, round table, without any conditions, where this is highly important. And we believe by dialogue we can achieve the demands and peaceful demands, and the situation in Bahrain need to be calm in terms of not only politics, in terms of economics. We have a lot of issues in terms of social. We have a lot of issues in terms of, because we don't have real representations. We've heard ministers, they're bringing their ideas. Imagine ministers saying like $1,000 can have a peace family, a settled family of 6 in Bahrain living in a good way. $1,000. What is $1,000 now with this inflation, with the taxes and stuff? A lot of issues need to be addressed. That's why this space needs to be open again, which is opposition back to the parliament. This is very, very important. It's not only Wifaq, it's opposition. Whoever is opposition in Bahrain need to go back to the parliament to fix this situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali. And again, I extend my thanks to everybody. I look forward to staying engaged on that topic and also following up once the IPU assembly starts. Again, Yasmin, very curious to see what your colleagues will be doing and what results hopefully they'll be able to bring. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice rest of your day.
Thanks, Ines. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gil. Thanks especially Drury and Jawad and Ines for the hard work of organizing and facilitating.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.